You have heard a bird singing in the middle of the night and thought it was beautiful. You were wrong about what you were hearing. That song is what a bird sounds like when its biology has been broken by artificial light, when its body believes it is dawn because of a bulb you left on, and it is spending the fat reserves it needs to survive the night on a performance that serves no one. You heard beauty. The bird was in distress. Those are not the same thing. Welcome to Bird Whisper. Stay until the end, because what we're covering today will permanently change the way you hear the night. We're going into exactly what artificial light does inside a bird's body, why the midnight song is not a quirk or a gift, but a biological distress signal, and what is specifically happening to the birds in your neighborhood right now, tonight, while most people are asleep and not watching. There is a light on somewhere near you, a streetlight, a porch bulb, a security fixture on the side of your garage, the glow from a window where someone left the television on. These lights feel like nothing. They are so ordinary, so constant, that most people stopped noticing them years ago. But the birds in your yard have not stopped noticing. They cannot. And what those lights are doing to them is specific, measurable, and happening on a schedule that researchers can now track almost to the minute. The question is not whether artificial light affects birds. That has been established. The question is what precisely it does inside the bird's body, and whether the answer is as serious as the data suggests. The second question, the one that will land harder once you understand the first, is how many birds in your specific neighborhood are running this same distress signal tonight? The answer is not a small number. To understand what light does to a bird, you have to start with what darkness does. A bird's body runs on a biological clock. Not metaphorically, literally. There is a system inside every bird called the circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour internal cycle that regulates when the bird sleeps, when it wakes, when it begins to sing, when its hormones shift, and when its metabolism ramps up for the demands of the day. This clock is set and maintained by a single input above everything else: light. Specifically, the ratio of light to darkness over a 24-hour period. That ratio tells the bird's brain what time it is, what season it is, and what behaviors are appropriate right now. In a world without artificial light, the world birds evolved in over 150 million years, this system is extraordinarily precise. The light-dark cycle is consistent, predictable. The bird's biology synchronizes to it perfectly, and the result is a creature operating in almost perfect alignment with its environment. But here's where it gets specific. The bird's circadian system does not evaluate light quality. It does not distinguish between the cool blue spectrum of early dawn and the warm orange glow of a sodium street lamp. It does not know the difference between photons arriving from the horizon after 8 hours of darkness and photons arriving from a 60-watt bulb on a porch that has been burning since 9 p.m. What it knows is light is present. And when light is present, the bird's brain interprets that as morning. Research from the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology has documented this mechanism in detail. When sufficient light reaches the photoreceptors in a bird's eye, and in some species, photoreceptors embedded in the brain itself, which can detect light that penetrates the skull, melatonin production drops. Corticosterone, the hormone that drives wakefulness and activity, rises. The hormonal cascade that prepares the bird for the demands of day begins. Not because it is day, because a light is on. It is 2:09 in the morning. A male American robin is roosting in a dense oak tree in a suburban yard in Charlotte, North Carolina. The temperature is 48 degrees Fahrenheit. He has been without food for 7 hours. His fat reserves are at roughly 70% of what he needs to survive until dawn. Not comfortable, but survivable if nothing changes. 20 feet away, a motion-activated security light on the side of a house clicks on. A raccoon passed the sensor. The light burns for 90 seconds and then goes off. Those 90 seconds are enough. The light reached the robin's eye at an intensity above the threshold his circadian system uses to distinguish night from dawn. Melatonin dropped, corticosterone spiked, and at 2:11 in the morning, the robin began to sing. Not because it was morning. Because his body was told it was morning by a light that was on for 90 seconds and triggered by a raccoon. He sang for 23 minutes. At a metabolic cost that researchers studying urban robin populations have calculated as equivalent to approximately 8% of the fat reserves a robin of his size carries on a typical April night. By 2:34, the light was long off. The robin had stopped singing. He was back in something resembling rest, but his fat reserves were now at 62%. The temperature overnight would drop to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. The energy required for thermal regulation through the remaining hours of darkness would consume most of what was left. He made it to morning. Many do not. This is the mechanism. This is what light does inside the bird. Now let's talk about what it costs, because the fat reserve calculation is not a minor inconvenience. It is the entire margin between surviving the night and not. A robin weighs approximately 77 grams, about the weight of a handful of grapes. On a cold spring night, that bird needs to maintain a core body temperature of around 104 degrees Fahrenheit against ambient temperatures that may drop into the 30s or 40s. The energy required for that thermoregulation comes entirely from fat reserves built during the previous day's feeding. Those reserves are not generous. They are calculated almost exactly to last through the night, built up across hours of active foraging, calibrated by the bird's biology to match the expected duration of darkness. There is very little surplus. Evolution does not build surplus into animals that need to fly. Research published in the journal Functional Ecology measured overnight fat depletion in American robins across urban and rural environments. Robins roosting in areas with high artificial light at night showed significantly lower body mass at dawn than robins roosting in dark environments. Not because they fed less during the day, because they spent more of the night singing. The singing cost them weight they could not afford to lose. And weight lost overnight is weight that must be replaced the next day before the next night begins. A bird that arrives at dawn already running a deficit has to spend more of the following day feeding just to return to baseline, which means less time for territory defense, less time for pair bonding, less time for the behaviors that determine whether it successfully reproduces that season. The light does not just cost the bird one night. It costs the bird the entire season. Stop for a moment and consider what that means at the scale of a single bird's life. A robin lives on average 2 years, in some cases longer, but 2 years is the median, 2 breeding seasons. That is the entire window this bird has to reproduce, to pass on its genes, to do the one thing evolution has spent millions of years optimizing it to do. If every lit night across both of those breeding seasons is degrading its fat reserves, elevating its stress hormones, and reducing its reproductive success, then the light outside your house is not a minor inconvenience to a bird that has other options. It is a significant fraction of the only life it gets. Now, how many birds are running this calculation right now? Tonight, in your neighborhood. Studies using acoustic monitoring across urban and suburban environments have found that in areas with artificial light at night, between 40% and 75% of robin populations begin singing before 3 a.m. during spring and summer months. Not occasionally, regularly. On most lit nights, most of the breeding season, robins are the most documented species because their song is loud, distinctive, and easy to record, but they are not the only species affected. Song sparrows, blackbirds, European starlings, thrushes, American mockingbirds, a species so responsive to artificial light that documented cases exist of individual mockingbirds singing continuously through entire summer nights in well-lit urban neighborhoods, not pausing, not resting, burning through reserves across 7 and 8 consecutive hours of false dawn. One bird, one streetlight. 8 hours of singing that should not have happened. Researchers who recovered one such bird found it weighed 14% less than the minimum healthy body mass for its species at that time of year. It had been singing itself toward a threshold its body could not cross. Here is the part most people do not expect. The light doing the most damage to the birds in your yard is probably not the streetlight at the end of the block. It is not the parking lot 2 streets over. It is not the commercial signage you can see from your bedroom window. It is the light coming from inside your house. Research from the British Trust for Ornithology measured light exposure in gardens across urban and suburban England and found that interior residential lighting, light escaping through uncurtained windows, was a primary driver of elevated light levels in outdoor roosting environments. The television you leave on, the kitchen light that stays lit while you do things in another room, the lamp by the chair where you read until 11. These lights, filtered through glass, reduced in intensity but not eliminated, reach the trees and shrubs where birds roost within meters of your house. They are not bright enough for you to notice from outside. They are bright enough for a bird's circadian system to register as a signal. And that signal, arriving at 11:30 p.m. or midnight or 2 a.m., tells the bird, morning is coming. Start singing, spend the reserves. This is not a single bird on a single night. This is every lit night. For the entire breeding season, which for robins runs from March through July, for song sparrows from February through August, for northern mockingbirds from April through August. Every night those species spend within range of residential light is a night their biology is receiving a false dawn signal. Some birds habituate partially. Their response thresholds shift upward slightly with repeated exposure. But the habituation is incomplete, and the metabolic cost does not disappear. Research on long-term light-exposed populations shows chronically elevated stress hormone levels, reduced immune function, and in some studies, measurably lower reproductive success compared to birds in darker environments. The midnight song you have been hearing for years is not a tradition. It is a symptom. Here is what you now know that you did not know before. When a bird sings at midnight, its biology is not running correctly. The circadian system that should be holding it in rest and conservation through the coldest, most dangerous hours of the night has been interrupted by artificial light. The hormones that should be suppressed are active. The fat reserves that should be held in reserve are being spent on song, and the threshold of light required to trigger this is lower than almost anyone realizes. Low enough that light escaping through your curtains, reduced to a fraction of its indoor intensity, can be enough. The number of birds running this signal in your neighborhood tonight depends on how much light your neighborhood produces after dark. In heavily lit urban areas, studies suggest the majority of light-sensitive songbird species, robins, song sparrows, blackbirds, mockingbirds, thrushes, are singing significantly earlier than their biology requires. Not some of them, most of them. Most nights, the sound you heard at 2 in the morning and described to someone the next day as beautiful, that clear, full-throated song in the middle of the night that made you stop and listen was a bird running out of time. Its body thought morning had come, so it did what it does at morning. It sang. It burned what it had. And somewhere in the dark hours before actual dawn, it either built enough reserves to survive or it did not. You will never know which, but you heard it, and now you know what you were hearing. Here is what matters next, because this is not a story that ends in helplessness. The lights causing the most damage to roosting birds are the ones closest to where the birds sleep, and those are the lights most directly in your control. 3 specific changes produce measurable reductions in light exposure for birds roosting within 30 meters of a residential building. The first is curtains. Closing window coverings after dark reduces outdoor light spill from interior fixtures by up to 90% in the immediate garden environment. Not blackout curtains. Not any special equipment. The curtains already on your windows closed. The second is motion sensors. Replacing always-on exterior fixtures with motion-activated alternatives eliminates the continuous low-level light exposure that chronic circadian disruption requires. A light that comes on for 90 seconds when something moves and then goes off is categorically different, in terms of avian circadian impact, than a light burning continuously from dusk to dawn. Both can trigger a singing event. Only one does it all night. The third is direction. Downward-facing exterior fixtures that illuminate the ground rather than casting light upward and outward into trees and shrubs reduce canopy light exposure dramatically. The bird in your oak tree is not affected by light hitting the pavement beneath the tree. It is affected by light reaching the branches where it roosts. None of these changes cost anything significant. All of them work tonight. So here is the answer to the question the hook planted. What does artificial light do inside a bird's body? It tells a system that evolved over 150 million years to respond to light that morning has arrived. It drops melatonin. It raises corticosterone. It initiates the hormonal cascade of dawn. And it does this whether the light is the sun rising over an unlit landscape or a 40-watt bulb left on in a kitchen 2 houses down. The bird cannot tell the difference. You can. The next time you hear a bird singing in the dark, at midnight, at 2 a.m., at any hour when the sky is still black, you will not hear what you used to hear. You will hear a circadian system that has been interrupted, a fat reserve being spent, a body doing what it was told to do by a signal it had no way to question. You will hear what it costs. That is not a smaller experience than the one you had before. It is a larger one, because now the sound means something specific. Now you know what is actually happening in the dark outside your window. And now you have something most people who hear that song will never have: the knowledge of what to do about it. The most dangerous light for a bird is not the one bright enough to see by. It is the one dim enough to ignore. Tell me in the comments, have you ever heard a bird singing in the middle of the night? What time was it, and what did you think was happening? I want to hear about it. I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one.